Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. As part of this year's Summer Replay series, I'm revisiting some of the most important episodes in our podcast archives. These are conversations and lessons that are just as relevant today as when they first aired. Today's replay is all about one of the hardest questions we face with fibromyalgia. How do you know when it's okay to push yourself and when you have to rest? In this episode, I pull back the curtain and share how I make those decisions in my own life. You'll also hear a surprising number of travel tips for making trips a little bit easier on your fibro body. Now, before we jump in, a few quick updates since this episode first aired. You'll find replays of the Fibromyalgia Wellness Summit at fibrowellnesssummit.com. You'll also find many of the products and services I mention in this episode in my Tami's Favorite Things vault. You'll find the link for that along with all the other links mentioned in this episode in today's show notes. All right, let's dive in to today's replay, how to know when to push and when to rest. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stacklehouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse, and this is episode 155. Today, I want to give you a peek behind the curtains at my own life and how I make decisions on when to push and when to rest, and how I plan my recovery. This kind of came about because our last Stories of Hope episode 154, one of our graduates, Victoria, who also happens to be a psychologist from Europe, said, quote, "If you ask me what will help you, counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy are about managing and trying to accept your illness. But to find how to live, that's coaching." End quote. Victoria and I had been talking about a study published that shows that cognitive behavioral therapies are effective at helping people with depression and helping them cope with their illness. But CBT does not show long-term evidence in improving actual pain, fatigue, brain fog, or the other symptoms of fibromyalgia. In other words, CBT can help you feel better about and to cope with your fibromyalgia symptoms, but it doesn't actually make those symptoms better. Working with a certified fibromyalgia coach, however, is proven to improve your actual symptoms. As Victoria said, if you want to find out how to live, that's coaching. And the reason for that is that all of our certified fibromyalgia coaches, everyone who is a certified fibromyalgia coach, has direct personal experience living with fibromyalgia every single day. Not only do we live with fibromyalgia, but we've also found ways to feel significantly better, with many of us having our fibromyalgia in remission. So today, I'm going to give you a peek at how I manage my own fibromyalgia to give you an example of how to live, as Victoria put it. Now, as always, I do want to remind you that the information included in this podcast is not meant to be considered medical advice or replace consulting with your own healthcare providers. What I'm doing here is sharing how I manage my fibromyalgia and my other chronic health conditions. There may be reasons why the things that work for me aren't going to work for you, and maybe even reasons why you should not do what I do. So please take what you learn here and discuss it with your own providers. And if you'd like more personal advice for your unique situation, feel free to schedule a consultation with me or one of my students or coaches. Like I said, we all have fibromyalgia too, and we can give you some practical tips on how you can live better from someone who does it every day. So, let's dive in. As you probably know, earlier this year, I hosted our first Fibromyalgia Wellness Summit back in January. It was titled Living Well with Fibromyalgia, Real Patients, Expert Advice, Proven Results. Now, what you probably don't know is while that summit was running, I was very decidedly not living well with fibromyalgia. I knew the summit was going to be a lot of work, but it ended up being about 4 times the a lot that I was expecting. As a result, in order to pull off the summit and what I had promised our attendees and their VIPs were going to get, in order to provide that, I ended up getting only about 4 or 5 hours of sleep for those 2 weeks. It just took me so much longer to get the things done that needed to be done. And I'm sure you have found yourself in a similar situation from time to time, right? Your spouse gets sick and you've got to do all the things at home, taking care of kids, pets, the house, grocery shopping, food, many things that you likely were not doing because of your fibromyalgia, but somebody's got to do it, right? Or maybe there's a huge project at work with a very important deadline and it is all hands on deck until the project is completed. We all face situations like this from time to time, right? It's just part of life being life. We need to be careful, though, that this doesn't become life 24/7. It's okay if this is a temporary situation, if we temporarily have to put all good sense aside and do whatever we need to do to get whatever needs to be done. And when I talk about temporary, I'm talking about a few weeks. If we start getting into a few months of this kind of living, something's got to give. We have to make changes. And that's where I think our students and coaches can be super helpful, because sometimes it can be really difficult to know how to change things and even to know what needs to change. And as people with fibromyalgia, we've had to figure that out for ourselves, for our own lives. So knowing that the summit was only 2 weeks long, knowing my own health and my own body as well as I do, I knew I could do it. I knew I could get through what needed to be done for those 2 weeks. I also knew I was going to need some recovery time. There was no way that I was going to be able to do that forever. And there was no way I was going to be at 100% when it was done, right? So I needed to plan how this was going to be over, which sort of took care of itself because it was only a 2-week summit. But I also needed to plan how I was going to recover. So what we do in those situations, again, is different than if you're living a life that is like this every single day. So, like I said, if you are doing this every single day, something has to change. So I want to be super crystal clear, which is why I've said this like 4 times in a minute here. It's okay if it's temporary, if it's for a few weeks. If it's longer, we've got to do something different. Okay. So got through the summit. It just was going to be what it was going to be, had to do what I had to do. But during that time, I sat down with my husband and I said, I'm going to need some recovery time when this is all over. And what do you think about going away for a week when this is done? And so we planned a week away. We've got a timeshare and we scheduled a week at a condo on the water in Discovery Bay, Washington, which is a little tiny place that like the closest gas station, grocery store, restaurant is like half an hour away. So it was really out in the middle of nowhere, quiet, dark, peaceful, exactly what my nervous system was going to need after going a million miles an hour during the summit. So we scheduled that time. And the summit was at the end of January, and we didn't schedule this until the end of February. And the reason for that was because on top of the summit, I also had our Stories of Hope event happening at the beginning of February. So summit followed directly by graduation event. It was a lot for those couple of months there. But we had that vacation planned, and that has always been a key for me, is to have planned recovery time after those times when I push myself. So maybe you're not going to do something crazy like a 2-week-long summit and then a live event for graduation. Maybe that is not going to happen. But maybe you just know, maybe you've got people coming to your house. Maybe you've got a vacation that you're taking with family and you know you're going to need recovery after the vacation, right? We've all been on vacations like that. So plan for how you're going to recover. Maybe it's not a week at the beach or whatever, but maybe it is planning a day on your calendar where there's nothing scheduled. I used to do this all the time when I would travel. I would plan a day after I got home. So if I got home on a Tuesday, I would block off my calendar on Wednesday and have literally nothing to do, where I could sleep in as long as I wanted. I could just rest my body, rest my mind, rest my spirit, come down from all that overstimulation and be ready then to go on Thursday, right? So planning that recovery time has always been a key for me. It's also important to consider what kind of recovery you need. So knowing that doing the summit, doing graduation, there was going to be a lot of people time. And it may not seem like it with all the things that I do, but I am actually an introvert. I fall on the introverted side of things. I love being with people, but at the end of that, I need to go be by myself, right? I do get that overstimulation that happens. My nervous system, fibromyalgia is not one of those things that you're magically cured of. We can manage it to the point of being in remission, like mine is, but we still have those tendencies in our bodies, right? Like I have that nervous system that can very easily get stuck in fight or flight. So when I am overstimulated, I need to make sure I have time to turn that back off. And so we did not plan a week to Vegas, right? I don't need more stimulation. I need quiet, calm. And this was also why we specifically chose that particular location with our timeshare, because it is quiet. It's dark. There's nobody around for half an hour, right? We have to purposefully engage with people. Otherwise, we're just locked in our hole and don't see anybody the entire time. And that's what my nervous system needed. So think about the kind of rest you need. Maybe you've been doing a lot of brain work and you need to, not even sit around and read a book, but just stare out the window. Maybe you've been doing a lot of physical body type work. And so maybe you can read a book. You just need to sit in one place and not do anything. Maybe your recovery includes things like going to the chiropractor, getting acupuncture, getting massage, myofascial release, going floating, hyperbaric oxygen, whatever it is that your body needs to recover, plan that in as well. So we're planning our recovery time after we push. So back in the day, before I had fibromyalgia, I worked for a software company, and we used to have these really big quarterly projects. We would have information coming in. We need to process it. We need to put it back out to our customers in a very short turnaround time. And so it was all hands on deck, do everything as much and as fast as you can, work extra hours, like the whole 9 yards. I knew that was going to happen. And so I could then plan, first of all, not have extra things on my calendar, right? Simplify as much as possible, make as much space as possible, and plan that recovery time. What is it that you need to recover? The other thing that I did was think about the trip itself, right? So I planned for my recovery, but I also planned for the trip. So knowing, for instance, that we are going to be in a place where the closest restaurant or grocery store is half an hour away, it's a minimum hour and a half, 2 hours round trip just to go get something to eat. So that meant we needed to plan food. We needed to plan snacks. We also needed to plan to be comfortable, right? Like I do still live in a fibro body. So that meant things like, how comfortable is that bed going to be and how can I make it as comfortable as possible? Because I'm not sleeping in my own super comfy bed, I'm sleeping somewhere else. So what do I need to plan for that? Then preparing for the trip itself, right? So some of the things that I did with that is, you've heard me talk about Hungry Root. It is a grocery/meal delivery service. It's not quite like the meal delivery services where you are going to spend half an hour preparing a meal. It's the kind of thing where you can get pre-cooked chicken and already chopped up lettuce and have a healthy Caesar salad in 5 minutes. It's that kind of meal prep. And you can order just regular groceries. So I planned out my order. I planned what I was going to need, and I scheduled my Hungry Root order to arrive the day that we were leaving. Now, they pack those boxes amazing. They have insulation. They've got ice packs in there. They're packed to be able to stay cold and have the food stay good all day, because they don't know exactly when it's going to arrive at your house. It could be first thing in the morning or it could be last thing at night, right? They don't know when that's going to be. So they pack it well. And I knew if I got that box and I just left it unopened, it would be fine until we got to the place we were going, which is about a 2-hour drive away for us. So I planned that box. I planned what I was going to need, what I was going to need to eat, both for comfort food. So yes, there was some good chocolate in there, and for my body, right? So making sure that there's fresh fruit and protein and those kinds of things, right? So I planned that box. It arrived before we left. We just put it straight in the car. Actually, I think I opened it up and put a couple other things that needed to stay cold in there. And then we just put it in the car just like it was. When we got to our condo, of course, I could unpack it and put it in the fridge. Now, they are condos, so we did have a full kitchen, which also made that easier when you're half hour away from everything. But I had that all planned. I also planned all the things that I was going to need, like I said earlier, to be comfortable. This is not the time to pack light. As a fibro person, you are going to need to pack differently than a lot of other people. So that meant I literally took 2 heating pads, one to go in the bed, one to go in the living room. I packed my fuzzy blankie to curl up with in the living room. My husband packed his chair cushion so that he had something soft to sit on. I packed my Ember mug that keeps my tea hot. I packed my favorite tea. We even packed the good toilet paper, because when you go to these places, they do not have the good toilet paper. And I'm tired of using tissue paper for toilet paper. So we stuck a roll in the car. Driving, of course, is different than flying. I would have different tips for flying with fibromyalgia. But for this trip, we could load up that car. And so I took all the things I was going to need to be comfortable. Again, not packing light, but packing for comfort, for rest, for recovery. Now, if you're planning your recovery day at home, obviously that looks a lot different. And that might include things like maybe making sure that you have food on hand ahead of time, even if it's just at home. So planning those things ahead of time. During the trip, there were a lot of things that I did differently as well. So I moved furniture around. We moved chairs around. I moved a chair so that I could put my feet up on the chair. I pulled extra pillows off the bed and used them to prop up my knees and my feet and behind my back on the couch, doing all those things to make life comfortable. We even went to the store and bought a couple of things. I did not think about the fact that they would not have a way for me to make hot water. There was no tea kettle. There was just a microwave, but nothing big enough for me to heat up enough hot water to put in my ember mug. And you can't put those things in the microwave, right? It'll fry the electronics. So I had to go find a way to heat up water. So we went to Walmart and got a cheap $12 electric kettle. So don't be afraid to do what you need to do to keep your body happy, your emotions, your spirit, your brain happy, and to be comfortable. If you could learn one lesson from this podcast episode, well, there's a couple lessons I would want you to learn, but one of them would be to stand up for what it is that you need. Like, listen to your body. Give your body what it is that she is needing to feel her best. Don't skimp on it. Don't say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. We're on vacation. I don't have that with me. I want to pack light. All of those things, throw that out the window. You need to take care of you. And don't be afraid to ask people, if go into Walmart to get the tea kettle, Scott went with me, right? It wasn't I don't want to, bother you. Don't need to go do that. No, we do need to go do that. We do need to go find that for me to really be comfortable. And not just the bare minimum of comfortable, but my minimum of comfortable. One of our coaches, Julie Schiffman, she told me once that what might look like being over the top for someone else is actually the bare minimum for us. It takes a lot more self-care to keep a fibro body happy. So somebody might look at you and think, wow, she's a lot. She is extra, right? But that's our bare minimum. So don't feel like you have to minimize that. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself. The second lesson, if you could only learn a couple of lessons from this podcast episode, is everything that I'm talking about planning. Planning is a big, big key to managing your fibromyalgia. So plan. And all that planning I did ahead of time to be prepared for the trip meant that all I had to buy was a $12 electric kettle. I didn't also have to buy a heating pad or extra pillows or a blanket or any of those kinds of things. I had those because I had planned ahead. So planning. The other thing I will say with that too is it is super, super helpful to have a packing list. Fibro bodies need extra things and fibro brains forget. So you need to put those things on a list. So knowing that we ended up somewhere that didn't have a way for me to heat up water for tea, I started a packing list. Next time we go to our timeshare, the electric kettle is on the list. The speaker is on the list. We wanted a speaker to be able to play music while we were there. So that's on the list. So any of those kinds of things that you want to make sure that you bring or even do. I will tell you what, I had a task list. So, I'm talking about going away for this week of recovery, but for all the trips that I used to go on, this even before fibromyalgia, when I would go on a trip, I had a list, not only a packing list, but a list of things that I needed to do. So that included things like, when I was still at work, change the voicemail on the work machine, all of those things, but also things like schedule the chiropractor visit for when I get home, all of those types of things as well. So lists, checklists are a fibro brain's best friend. Make those checklists so that you don't forget. Now, doing the trip is its own kind of recovery, right? But when that week was over and Scott and I were coming home, he and I were actually both a little uncomfortable. I won't even say in pain because it wasn't even that much. Sleeping in somebody else's bed is never as good as your own, right? And so after, a couple of days, every time I would go to bed, I would think, oh, I wish this was my bed. And so when we got home, I told him, my body physically does not feel refreshed. In fact, it feels a little beat up from not being in our comfy space, but my brain feels refreshed and my soul feels refreshed, right? So there's a value in getting away, even if it's uncomfortable for your body. We have to balance all of that. But I say this to point out that sometimes you need recovery from your recovery, right? So my brain and my soul was recovered from being away for a week in a place that was dark and quiet and calm and beautiful. But then my body needed to recover from that, from sleeping in a bed that was too hard and chairs that were uncomfortable, right? So we planned our trip so that we would come home on a Saturday, still have Sunday to recover from the recovery, and then go back to work on Monday. And that makes such a big difference for both of us, actually, rather than, making that vacation go as long as possible, come home Sunday night and go right back to work on Monday. That would have been horrible. So, coming home, having a chance to be able to sleep in your own bed a couple of nights, to be able to just relax, love on the cats, wash the clothes, order the groceries for home, all of those things, to then be ready to go back to life as normal. And again, all of this goes back to that key of planning and the key of knowing what you need and doing what you need to do to get what you need. I mean, that's really what planning is about, right? We plan so that we can get what we need and we can keep our bodies happy. So, like I said, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain because I think sometimes you might listen to this podcast and look at all the things that I do. Oh, there's a summit. Oh, there's a Stories of Hope event. Oh, here's another podcast episode. And it might look like I do all the things all the time. And you don't see the times where I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep a night because I bit off a little bit more than I could chew. So again, I wanted to give you a peek at that because I want you to know how to live, right? We were actually just talking about this in our coach class, our Alumni Association class, just yesterday. Our conversation was about business, but I think this is true for fibromyalgia as well. You see people after they've already figured it out, but you don't really see people in the process of figuring it out. And so I wanted to give you a peek at that process. It is okay to do more than you really should do, right? It is okay to push yourself occasionally. Like I'm talking here and there, a couple of weeks at most at a time. It's also okay to have times where life is a lot and then times where life is very calm. I very much believe that balance, finding balance, like everybody talks about work-life balance, but you could also think about fibro-life balance, that balance is something that happens on a bigger scale. If you find perfect balance every single moment, you have a very boring life, right? Because balance means not hot, not cold, lukewarm. Balance means not spicy, not sweet, just bland. Balance means not too busy, not sitting around doing nothing, but like the perfect amount of activity. That is a very freaking boring life, in my opinion. There might be some of you out there that is actually the perfect life, in which case, go have at it. But especially for me as a playmaker, and I know for our perfectionists would be this way as well, we need that fun. There are times where we want the spicy or the sweet or the hot or the cold or the busy or the sitting there doing nothing, staring out the window, right? We need to take a bigger view of balance and think about how we're balancing that overall. I talked about this in our episode. I can't remember the episode number off the top of my head, but I'll put it in today's show notes. The episode about embracing life's winter season. And if you want to grab that link in the show notes, our show notes today, you'll find at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/155. And in that episode, I talk about the fact that nature has seasons, right? We've got winter. You look outside your window and the trees look dead. But in the spring, in the summer, there's leaves all over the trees. Things are blooming. There's ripe fruits. Even in nature, if you just look at the cycle of life in general, there are busy times and there are quiet times, right? We've got our bears that hibernate. We've got the time of the year where we're all voting for the fattest bear in Alaska, right? So the balance comes when we look at the whole picture. So yes, I could have planned better for that summit. And next time we do one, I will absolutely be doing it differently than I did this time. But balance also comes with pushing really hard and then resting really hard. We just want to make sure that that is not the everyday norm. That is the exception to the rule. Moments of things, right? We've also talked on this podcast about things being flare worthy, being worthy of going into a flare for. One of the examples I always use is if you're gluten-free and you're trying to avoid sugar and dairy, and your grandmother bakes you her famous chocolate cake for your birthday, you're probably going to eat a piece and it's worth it. But you're also then going to want to plan for how are you going to recover from the inevitable flare from having grandma's chocolate cake, right? It was absolutely flare worthy to put on that summit for all of you. It was amazing. And the feedback that we've got is amazing. It was so rewarding, but I cannot live like that every day. And I need time to recover, right? So just think about these lessons. Think about this idea of planning. Think about this idea of planning for your recovery, and then, if needed, recovering from your recovery. And think about this idea of being honest about what it is that you actually need, what it is that you need to feel your best, what it is that your body needs, and then not being afraid to stand up and ask for that. Nobody is going to know what you need if you don't tell them. If you tell them, then eventually they might learn what you need, right? Like me being able to tell my husband, hey, what do you think about going away for a week? He was like, yep, that's what we need to do. But he's had lots of practice in watching me take care of myself, right? And your family might not understand that at first. And so you have to teach them. That's your job, to stand up for what you need and not worry about anybody else. Because if you take care of yourself, you can take better care of them. So as we wrap up, I do want to share our listener shout out. And this is actually a message that I got from one of our VIP support members at the end of our Living Well with Fibromyalgia Summit. This is from Cindy. So hello, Cindy. She says, what a wonderful summit. I'm so glad I got to learn so much, and I miss you all today. This experience has been the answer to my prayers. I have so much info to go through, and I can't believe I found you all. Having hope is an amazing feeling. Tami, you did a magnificent thing for so many people, including me. I hope your vacation gives you all the self-care and relaxation you need. I hope it gives you great satisfaction knowing you are helping so many people. It makes such an amazing impact. Thank you so much for that, Cindy. And I hope this episode is an answer to your hope there. Vacation was awesome, and it was all the self-care and relaxation that I need, with the exception of the massage and the chiropractor visit that I have in a day or two. That will be the final cherry on top of my recovery. And I do want to mention to all of you too that our summit is over for the moment, but I am already starting to plan for our next summit, which should be held this fall. If you would like to get on the waiting list to be notified as soon as our registration opens for our next event, just go to fibrowellnesssummit.com. And remember all 3 S's there in the middle. It's fibrowellnesssummit.com. And you can put yourself on the waiting list. We'll send you an email as soon as that registration opens. I also want to just remind you that you can go to today's show notes. I will include a link to that study I mentioned at the very beginning about how cognitive behavioral therapy helps you cope better with your illness and helps with depression, but does not actually long-term improve fibromyalgia, pain, fatigue, brain fog, sleep, all of that. I will include a link to that study if you would like to take a look at it. There's actually 2 things. One, the initial study, and then the other link will be for a meta-analysis of cognitive behavioral therapies for fibromyalgia, and you'll see that there. The other thing that you'll find, of course, is that link to where you can get on our mailing list and the link to that other episode I mentioned about embracing life's winter season. I also wanted to let you know that, this is episode 155. So we are coming up on our next Ask the Coach episode and episode 160. And in those Ask the Coach episodes, it's like Dear Tami, right? It's Dear Abby, but for fibromyalgia. So it's your Dear Tami episodes. And I answer questions sent in by you. So if you have a question you want me to answer on the podcast, send us a message. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com and you'll see contact in the main menu there. Just click on that and fill out the Ask the Coach form. And I might choose your question to answer on the podcast. See you back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.